The book of Hebrews is actually one of the most difficult books, but yet one of the most rewarding, and certainly one of the most necessary books. When I was younger, I used to read this book, and it was truly one of my least favorite books because it seemed so complex and so out of place with the readability of the other books of the New Testament. I thought it was completely dispensable. But really turns out that this is the indispensable book because above everything else, this book reveals what we call a very high Christology, which means it shows Jesus as who he is, as the exact radiance, the express image of God. That's why we call it high, because it focuses less on his identity in his humanness and more on his identity as God himself. It's really very important, and without the book of Hebrews, we would have no idea about Jesus' role regarding the high priesthood, his high priesthood according to Melchizedek, which I'm sure we'll get into, and some various other aspects of his identity. Now, regarding when Hebrews was written, who it was written to, and the million-dollar question, who wrote the book of Hebrews? That's obviously the most often asked question of every other question I'm asked about Hebrews is who wrote this book? And the answer is very simple. I don't know. And in fact, they didn't know early on. However, one thing that we can say is that it was certainly an associate of Paul. The ideas are Pauline, but it's not Paul himself. The language is different, but it's absolutely without question an associate of Paul. If it wasn't an associate of Paul, the book would not have gotten the distribution and the success that it did. So it had a very firm apostolic backer behind it. But as far as picking who wrote it, was it Apollos? Was it Luke? Was it? In the absence of evidence, reading the Bible in a sense is like forensic science. And if you don't have the evidence of someone else's writing, for example, we know Paul's writing, we can compare it against the book of Hebrews, it's not Paul. But all the other candidates that we can think it possibly could have been, we don't have a sample of their writing to say this matches or doesn't. So it's absolute speculation.